All right. Well, hey, thank you very much, guys. Jack Raynor. I've got Jack here with us as well as Drew. It says wireless nerd on the screen. Drew Lentz. Thank you guys for joining today. I'm really excited to talk to you guys to know to get to know you guys a bit more. I know you guys have been doing things in Wi-Fi for quite a while, um, and you both have you're at very interesting places right now. So I'm really eager to get to know you guys a bit more. Before I jump into asking you guys questions, do you have any thoughts or questions you want to share now or ask?
No, man. How's
I
the
don't.
podcast going? Pretty good. I
Uh,
mean, you getting good traction. I mean, there's a couple, 2, 3 listens there. It's pretty awesome, man.
Yep, yep. Like I said before, and when we were discussing before, I've got tens and tens of listeners right now, so we're growing.
Fantastic.
No,
Love it.
it's been
so
fun. It's been fun.
I have watched and listened to some of your previous podcasts. And they were very interesting. You had Bob Friday on and Keith Parsons and Drew and UC and people like that. And I don't have that kind of history in Wi-Fi, so I'm honored to be here amongst some of the really greats in the industry. So I appreciate the invite.
Well, I appreciate you making some time for us. You're doing really interesting things in Wi-Fi right now, so I'm eager to learn a bit more about that. So, Jack, if I can, I'll just start with you. Talk a bit about you just said that you don't have a lot of I guess time in Wi-Fi specifically. Kind of tell us where did you get your start, and how did you end up doing more with Wi-Fi? Just kind of give us like a brief rundown, if you can, about your career and how you got to where you are
Yeah,
now.
thanks. Yeah. Well, when I say I don't have a long history with Wi-Fi, I don't have a long direct history. I've always worked, not always, but first of all, I'm a nerd as well. I haven't always been a wireless nerd, but I've always been a tech nerd. I've always run my own networks, and things like that, and I have a pretty sophisticated home network setup and IoT setup. So I do kind of play with it on my own. And in industry, my background has always been behind the scenes. So I'm a software developer by trade. Started my career at Comcast in the early 2000s in this industry. And I've always been involved in writing software and managing software for management and orchestration of networks. So I've always been somewhat related to the various networks, right? It's really been a multi-network history for me, both in wired and wireless. I didn't get directly involved in Wi-Fi networks. I started out at Comcast, as I mentioned, and I moved over to the vendor side in Motorola in the mid 2000s, and took the ride from Motorola to Google to Aris, and then at Aris, we created a managed Wi-Fi service run by a guy named Jay Besterman, and my team was responsible for writing some management, automation, and orchestration of that managed Wi-Fi service. And we were using Ruckus even before Aris acquired Ruckus. We were using Ruckus APs and switches, and then obviously Aris acquired Ruckus, and we started working directly with the Ruckus team, and that was really my first introduction into Wi-Fi, enterprise Wi-Fi, for sure. And then I got to work alongside a couple of good friends and colleagues, Chris Bush and Jaspreet Sachdev, who were both had moved over to Meta in the connectivity organization, following Dan Rabinovitz, who led that organization, who was a leader at Ruckus, and they brought me over there to work on Wi-Fi with them, and that's kind of how I got involved in Open Wi-Fi.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, you've been. I mean, I just pulled up your LinkedIn profile. I mean, you've been, like you said, with Motorola, um, Aris, CommScope. So you've been near Wi-Fi a lot. you know.
Yeah, and
Um,
yes, and again, writing software for those networks, just not involved in the RF side of it, right?
right. So, well, let me ask you then. So, would you still consider yourself very much on that software side, or are you doing more with the actual RF side and the things that a lot of us, wireless engineers geek out about? Are you doing a lot more in that area now, or is it still more like either software or just kind of running a show?
It's actually both. It's actually a little both, a little of all of that. Actually, I would say. Obviously, it's an open source software group, and so we write software. But that software needs to get tested, and it needs to, people need to troubleshoot the RF side of that to troubleshoot issues with the software stack, and we obviously turn some of those troubleshooting into bugs and or new features that become part of our stack. So it's really working from I would say the RF side of it, translating that into software requirements and then delivering it to our stack.
Cool. Have you ever done a NECA house survey?
I have not. I've never done anything like that.
Solid question. Solid question.
Oh, I just had to throw that out there. Well, that's really interesting because one of the things that I really enjoy about connecting with the other professionals, within what I would call our Wi-Fi community, is that not everybody got into Wi-Fi from networking. You
Mhm.
know, um, and I didn't come from I also came from more of a software side until I got some exposure to Wi-Fi and then got really interested in Wi-Fi and started going more down that road. And there's lots of, I guess, paths that can lead to um, you know, our world of Wi-Fi, right? And so
Yeah,
that's one of
again, my
go ahead.
path is software, and even through my entire career, through all those companies that you mentioned, because I was, writing ops software mostly, I actually never deployed or worked directly with any of the gear that we pulled the data from and managed. So it's actually that's my story of my entire career probably.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. So when I'm curious, you right now are involved, obviously, in the open Wi-Fi. Um, what would you call that? Project initiative
Yep, it's a
project.
project group.
And so you're probably hearing a lot of feedback from people who are looking at it, testing it, comparing it to the other vendors that we're all familiar with. Um, Drew, don't say anything about these other vendors we're familiar with. But when people make that comparison or talk about um, different information that they want to see in this open Wi-Fi project, whether they're using the cloud SDK or one of the other cloud providers. Um, like, how do you try to understand what it is that they're wanting, right, from their perspective of what they get from other vendors? Have you gotten very familiar with what all of those bells and whistles, those nerd knobs that we call them, are? Um, how does that work for you when you're involved, when you go to like a WLPC and you're talking to a bunch of wireless nerds like us, and
Yeah.
you know, how, how how do you take from those conversations and apply to what you're doing right now with open Wi-Fi?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I actually did a presentation at WLPC on the final day, and that was the most amazing show for me. Uh, Simply because it's a perfect fit for our community. I mean, our community is a bunch of software nerds uh, that also includes some wireless nerds. But the fact that and I said this in my presentation, the fact that the WLPC is wireless nerds, I think that's a perfect marriage with the software side of things. I think if we can get more of the RF nerds and the people that you see at WLPC using open Wi-Fi and providing the real time feedback to the community about how this is actually performing in the real world compared to all these great incumbents that are out there. We're the new kid on the block. We obviously want to try to be as good as those other solutions and compete. And the only way we can do that is to deploy it, get feedback, and make it better. I think the beauty of our model is that we have the ability to be agile in that sense, and kind of turn problems and create new features really rapidly compared to
Yeah.
someone who has a long product roadmap.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into some more of the open Wi-Fi details here in just a bit. But for you individually, you know, right now in our industry, things are kind of shaky for a lot of us, working for some of the larger tech companies. Um, what would you like to do? If you had to find something different to do tomorrow, like what do you think you would be looking for? Like, is there, do you think you'd want to stick with Wi-Fi? Is there more software development you want to do in a certain area? Like, what 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 would you say is something still coming up in your future?
Yeah, I think this, of all the things that I've done, I think this is the most fulfilling, and it would be frustrating for me as it is for others that were involved in this and don't have the chance to be involved in it still, because I am really passionate about this. I think I see, and because for several reasons. Number one, it's got the whole break the digital divide or close the digital divide. It's got the connect the unconnected potential there. We're deploying it. Spoke on a WCA event this morning and talked about how we're deploying in Kenya, in places where wouldn't be possible to have Wi-Fi if it wasn't for a solution like Open Wi-Fi. And so if you combine that with the fact that I see so much potential in it, it really does have the potential. It's still a potential at this point, but it does have the very strong potential to disrupt the industry and change how things are done. And when you have a chance to be involved in something like that, it's hard to not, you know, be emotionally invested in it. And
Sure.
so
Yeah.
ideally, because of that, I'd love to continue in this movement until I retire if I could. This is the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my career, and I've learned so much. I learned so much about Wi-Fi every day on the engineering calls, and the skills that I bring to it are open source software knowledge and community building knowledge and awareness and recognition type of stuff. And I do hope to continue this.
Yeah, that's one thing I can say about Wi-Fi, from my perspective, is it's like once it gets a hold of you, it's like this is just such cool stuff. And yeah, as a community and the vendors that are out there, and um, we're just seeing more and more functionality come into play that continues to make it more and more exciting. So I totally
Yeah.
hear what you're saying. And I hope you get to stick around with Wi-Fi, and particularly with open Wi-Fi, and making this really gain a lot of good traction. Um, you know, in the future, I think it's got some great potential. Anything else before I kind of jump over and put Drew under the AP? Is there anything else, Jack, that you would like
Yeah, I guess
to
I guess
share about yourself and your journey?
well, myself, it is what it is. I have a passion for kind of solving problems and technology and figuring things out, and so I get a chance to keep doing that, which is awesome. But I guess the other thing that I didn't mention about the Wi-Fi industry and specifically was the I have never worked in an industry where the people that work in it are as passionate as they are. Drew is one of those people. I love what he brings to the table. Just kind of raw, honesty and passion, and it's very down to earth group of people. And so, I really feel comfortable and at home, even though I'm a relative outsider. So, that's the other thing.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I feel the same way, right? There's a lot of great characters in our community. And so a lot of interesting
That's the right
people.
way to say that.
So.
That's definitely the right way to say that.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's switch over now and put Drew under the AP, so to speak. Speaking of characters, when I came back, because I was also there at the WLPC. Looks like Drew's having some
Oh, yeah.
technical issues here.
Works
Under
out.
the, I got you. There you are.
What's up?
My wife was always asking me questions about, hey, did you meet anybody new? Because I myself, I'm an introvert. I'm a classic engineer, right? I don't put myself out there and just talk to as many people as I can. I just kind of sit back and listen, right? But she's always asking
Uh,
me, who'd you talk to? Who'd you meet? And I told her, well, I actually met face to face the guy who I replaced at Comcast because he not replaced because anything bad happened. You moved on and found a really cool job at Meta. Um, and she's like, well, what do you think of like? Well, he reminds me of a cartoon character. I mean, he's just like all over the place.
You're like, he sucks, man. Yeah.
That's what came to my mind. Is like, yeah, Drew. I mean, he just reminds me of a cartoon character.
I
So
love
with
it.
that
I don't know
intro,
what
Drew,
I don't know what cartoons you watch, but I'll take it.
Looney Tunes, man, Looney Tunes.
Yeah, definitely something from Adult Swim.
Um, so Drew, yeah, I mean, you've been doing Wi-Fi for quite a bit as well, and you've got an interesting
A minute.
career,
Yeah,
and where you've
you
gone.
have
So
a
tell
little
us a bit.
How's what,
Say again,
Jack?
Jack.
you have foghorn leghorn in you. I can see
Yeah,
it.
right. I'll say.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
But
I
tell us a bit
man,
about your how you got into Wi-Fi initially, and why'd you get into it?
I don't know, man. I mean, how do any of us get into anything? I was drunk one night. No, I'm just kidding. You know, when I was a small child, no, honestly, when I was a small kid, I was always fascinated by radio towers. I grew up in this area that right down the street from me, there was a ham radio operator who had this big rig out in front of his house, and I was always fascinated with that and what it did. And my dad was an F4 Phantom pilot in the Marine Corps, and one time he gave me this flight manual about his airplane. And I flipped through and I was reading, it's the little book that the pilots keep on their leg when they fly, and it talked about VHF and UHF and how to tune the radio, and for some reason that was extremely fascinating to me, and I loved the fact that I could listen to things that weren't close to me, and I would stay up late at night and I would hide underneath my bed and I would get my AM radio and I would slowly tune from station to station to station to see how far of a broadcast I could pick up. I live in a very rural area of South Texas. I always say if this is the state of Texas, I live down here at the bottom, right on the Gulf of Mexico. We had an incredible rocket launch this morning. I don't know if anybody caught that. It was pretty awesome. It was about an hour away from the house. But I was always
Yeah, how'd that end
fascinated
up?
with radio communications.
How'd that rocket
What
launch
were you
end
gonna
up
say?
today?
It did. It
How did
it
that
it did exactly what it was supposed to do. It was a rapid what do they call it? A rapid unscheduled
unscheduled
dismantling. Yeah.
disassembly or something like that? RUD?
Disassembly. Yeah. Um no, man, I was just always interested in this stuff. And when I was oh god, I don't even know. I started building ISPs when I was very young, down here building, BBSs, and helped with some of the first internet service providers in our area of South Texas. And one day this guy came down from outside of the area and he needed some technical help because he was going to do this thing where he was taking these access points and shooting them across the oil field so that he could connect all the oil field platforms and the farmers. And I was like, that's very interesting. So I thought, I can help with that, but I wanted to know everything about it, and I didn't want to know just the data side of it. I come from a data background, so I could route switch until the cows came home. But what I was interested in was the RF component. So I figured, what better way to learn about RF than to go get my amateur radio license? So I went out and followed the path of my ham license. And so I'm staring at my Kenwood TS2000 sitting on my desktop right now. Go in the air right here. So KE5ZJO, I started with that, and I thought, who better to learn from than the people that have been doing RF for all those reasons. And then it was like, oh, cool, I can put data on this. And when we started to build out some of the first systems in 5 gig and unlicensed 5 gig stuff in the uni band, and then started working on projects in the MMDS band, or now the LBS band, and the EBS and LBS, or whatever it's called now, BRS, the broadband radio spectrum, 2.5, 2.6. I started messing with some of that stuff before WiMAX was a thing, and then went through WiMAX, and then went through LTE, and then went through Mesh, and I don't know, man. It just snowballed into whatever I'm doing now. So it's it's just always been an adventure on an adventure. But one of the things that always hit home with me was, in the area that I live in, there's not facilities that provide fiber optic or copper or data services in farmland and in ranch land, and especially in the economically challenged areas of our communities down here. The internet access doesn't really feed outside of the core area. So to me, wireless was a godsend for places like that. You didn't have to worry about running a line. You could just beam data through the air. So some of the first wireless ISPs that I built covered 9,800 square miles with 17 towers, and we could feed 2 to 5 megabit per second internet access to people 20 years ago using licensed frequencies. And so wireless has always been just a way to get things done. But as I moved more into enterprise, it was like, man, we're solving a lot of really interesting problems. We're solving a lot of connectivity problems. And then that turned into, well, man, what does that mean for the future? What, now that I don't have to have wires for things, how does that change the way that I interact with the world? How does that change the way that I shop, the way that I have friends, the way that I consume information, the way that I watch videos? All of that changes if I don't have to be tethered to anything. So when I started moving in that direction, I was like, man, there's all these incredible things you can do with it. And my career took me to some fantastic places like Comcast Business. A lot of love for the CB team over there, and that was a tremendous experience for me, because I got to play. And you ask anyone that I talked to in my 5 years there, I did refer to it as playing. I got to play with some of the funnest networks out there by building them and by exploring what can you do with this technology. And that was a great experience. And then, as you mentioned, I moved over. I got the opportunity to work with Jack over at Meta. I spent some time over there because I went back to my roots of connecting the unconnected, trying to figure out, how do I get everybody in the world connected to the internet in a very logical way that makes sense, that's cost effective, that doesn't require them to buy a bunch of equipment. And Meta was making some great strides in that. And then now, as fate would have it, I'm working at one of the top big dogs in the industry as a product manager in the wireless space. Don't know if I'm supposed to say their name or not, but I mean, you can look me up on LinkedIn. So, but
You,
it's a lot of fun. It's and
from my perspective, you can say you can name drop whatever and whoever you want here.
You can say whatever you want. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying things, but
Sure.
I'm not trying to jump in some hot water. But it's been this progression, man, in wireless. Like it's solving problems. That's what it all comes down to. It's solving problems, whether that's a problem of getting a household connected, or getting a tablet connected so people can have a better experience in drive-through for fast food, or whether it's, offloading cell phone service so that your cell phone works better in a grocery store. Like there's all these things that wireless gives you the ability to solve all these problems. And to me, it's tremendously fascinating, especially because you're working with that weird magic of data flying through the air in this completely uncontrolled environment, which adds a bit of fun complexity to it. So
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I very much feel the same way. That's one of the things that really got me interested in Wi-Fi is just the fact that, I mean, you mentioned two things, right? You're you're connecting people, like
mhm.
really connected them to the internet and getting them access um, to information and tools and whatever. So that's a really neat aspect of doing Wi-Fi. But then, yeah, just solving problems, like you said. I mean, it's so
Yeah.
fun to figure out how to do something with Wi-Fi, and how to make this application work better, or make this device, connect and stay connected and roam well, or there's a and that's just opening up right now, right? There's just so many new, it seems,
Oh yeah.
use
I mean,
cases that
and
are
if you
coming
look
on
at
board.
Yeah, and you look at the progression of the way that everything's moving, and you look at, you know, uh, the organization that I joined has been doing cloud stuff for quite a while. Um, but you look at now how more people are moving into cloud services, and then it's not even that. It's like it's not just the promise of the cloud, right? It's when you think about all the data that's being fed into there, and I'm not talking customer data, and you all know better than to think that that's a thing in 2023. Um, I'm talking about the telemetry and the data that's being obtained from the access points and the way that connectivity is happening between devices, whether it's choose your vendor, being able to look at those connections and say, man, we've got this huge data lake in the sky that we can leverage, ultimate processing power as much as we want to find, and then integrate AI into it. Now you can find problems that you didn't even know existed that were root causes of other problems. And you can use that data to make it better for everybody. To me, that's the coolest thing, because, now we've got this hive mind, if you will, across all these different vendors who are saying, look, let's instead of having to do a survey, who needs to do surveys anymore, right? I mean, and I hate to say that because I'm super pro
Hey,
survey,
careful,
right?
careful.
But what I'm saying is I think that there's so many different ways to use data that we haven't even unlocked yet. And if you have a good combination of inputs, whether that's from doing a survey or from walking around or from using a sensor or whatever it is, um, once you get these inputs and you can apply some really great AI to it, there's so much more um, flexibility in the way that you troubleshoot and that you monitor and that you use and that you administrate your networks, that it makes me rethink the way that I do day-to-day business operations, right? Day-to-day enterprise operations. All that's changed. It's all changed because you have these tools that nobody had before. You've got processing power that you never had before. You have all these things that make this ginormous difference in the way that you manage your networks. That's the future component of enterprise Wi-Fi that I'm really excited about, because we're just now getting into understanding what AI ops means, and how it can be problem solving and how it can fix things and how it can help people do their jobs. And then, of course, you've got the whole camp of people who are like, the computers are going to steal our jobs, and there's the meme, right? I, for one, welcome our robot overlords. I think that there's so many incredible things that we're going to see over the next couple of years that are only enabled by technology like that, that it's radically going to change the way that we as RF nerds do our jobs. There's still a lot of trickery to it, right? There's still a lot of tools that we need and things that we've got to go out and we've got to do data collection and analysis and all that for now, right? But what happens when my network is this hybrid network of Wi-Fi and 5G and 4G and Matter and Thread and Zigbee and LoRa? And now you've got all these different communications mechanisms that you're using to do very specific jobs. And the IT department only wants to pay one person to do wireless management. Like, are you going to consume all of the education needed to learn all of that and to be able to be that super administrator? Or are you going to look at these tools and go, man, these tools all do a great job getting me all the data that I need and sticking it in one location so that I can manage it the way that I need to? Because, I say it all the time. At the end of the day, the end user, the CTO, the end user, whoever it is, they don't care. They don't care if you're on 2, 4, 5 gig, 6 gig, CBRS, 800 megahertz. Nobody cares. Nobody cares except for the people listening to this podcast, right? These are the people that care. But the average end user, they just want their data and they want to give it to them quickly and efficiently. And they want to be able to do everything that they want to do. And if it doesn't work, it's the Wi-Fi. For some reason,
Always,
it's always the
always the
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi. Right. Well, the
So,
Wi-Fi's
all right.
become ubiquitous for internet, right? If I can't get
Yeah,
on the internet, the Wi-Fi is down.
that's right.
Well, you said Drew, you know, very well said. Everything that you just kind of went through, the developments and the capabilities, and the future of Wi-Fi. I mean, you kind of hit it all there. But let me ask you this though: what do you think's coming down the road in terms of like Wi-Fi or wireless connectivity? You talk about the future and how things are changing. Like, what do you see? What do you see coming down the
Oh
road?
man, such a an interesting time in our industry right now, and I'll try and I'm pretty sure some of the people listening to this podcast are people that I know in person, because we are such an incredible community and we do see each other at least once a year at WLPC. So hello to all my friends and hello to all the people that I don't know yet. Find me and I'll buy you a beer and we can meet. Also, buy Wi-Fi stand. It's great stuff. Anyway, but this message brought to you, no, but seriously, we're at such an interesting time, and I'm not trying to dodge anything. Obviously, where I work is I love where I work, and man, I get exposed to things that I never even imagined I would have access to, which
Well,
is so
you can
freaking
talk about
cool.
what you like there. I mean, I think, I'm gonna say
Yeah,
it,
it's
Meraki's
well,
doing a lot of really neat things right now. You've been
but
doing a
it,
lot
but
of
it,
really neat things. So what's
but
exciting
it's
you
not
there?
just that, right? And it's not just that organization, and it's not just where I choose to spend my 9 to 5. It's where the industry is moving as a whole, and I think back to, oh god, I don't even know, like 4 years ago or so, something like that. I was writing a bunch of blogs for HPE, listed as an HPE influencer, and Laura Mackey over there was just such a pleasure to work with, and she gave all of the HPE influencers the ability to just go get as close as we wanted to everybody in that organization, whether it was HPE or Aruba or anything in between. And I remember sitting in a session, and it was an analyst session, and it's when they were first announcing their Green Lake service, right? And they said everything is a service, and it was me and like the guys from Gartner and the ladies from Del Oro and from all these big analyst groups, and like Drew, a blogger, sitting around getting this press briefing, and Kirti was there. Hi Kirti, if you're listening. And I looked at him and I said, like leaned in, right? Everything is a service, everything. And he's like, shh. And I said, no, I mean, but do you mean like everything? Like access points and management and licensing and controllers and everything is a service? And he's like, shh, stop talking. And it blew my mind because he didn't say yes or no, and Antonio Neri didn't say yes or no, but all of a sudden, I started thinking about it. I was like, "Oh my god, everything is a service." And here we are, 5 years later, and we look at the moves that have been made by a number of different manufacturers in the marketplace. And I mean, you can name them, and it's all public data, right? HPE, and then Dell followed, and then Amazon started offering stuff. Cisco's always offered stuff. There's all these manufacturers that are coming in as a service, as a service, as a service. Then you look at where we are and what the spin out companies, John Chambers, his new company that he's just spun out. They were at WLPC also giving a interesting presentation. Um, I'm not as interested in their presentation and what their company does. I'm more interested in what that stands for with our place in the industry, because this everything is a service thing is a fascinating way to think about what the future means for those end users. And it touches back on what I was just saying, right? End users do not care how they're connected to the internet. Don't care. Wi-Fi, sure. LTE, sure. 5G, whatever. 6 gigahertz, who cares? As long as it does what they need it to do, that is ultimately what they're trying to accomplish. I have a goal. I'm trying to watch a video on YouTube. I'm trying to watch a rocket launch from SpaceX. Don't care how it gets to me. I just care that I can do it. So if that's the case, the networks need to be built in order to handle all of those loads no matter what the customer is asking for, right? Makes sense. And those networks need to be able to deliver that experience. And as network administrators, we need tools that give us the ability to understand what that experience looks like and troubleshoot based on the experience, not based on the channel size or based on the frequency, but based on the overall experience, if that makes sense. Take that one step further, and you have people who are saying, let's just take all of that out of the equation. Let's get to the point where AI can operationally run networks without any input, but only look at, this is what I'm trying to deliver. Here's the medium in which I'm trying to deliver it. And here's the profile of the user that's requesting that. And if you think about where that heads and you think about how that gets done and how that gets accomplished, in today's role, right? Even at CB when I was over there, it's managed service provider, right? Hey, we'll take care of your network, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. We'll put in the equipment, we'll put in this, we'll make sure it works. You give us one monthly fee, we're good to go. Awesome. Have a great day. Great relationship. As long as it works, customer's happy, customer pays the bill, managed service provider gets to do what they do. In the future, what if that managed service provider is just in between the manufacturer and the customer? What happens when this 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 managed service provider is no longer needed? Because everything's coming direct from that manufacturer. All the services, everything is a service. Here's your license, here's your access point, here's everything. Doesn't matter what brand it is, doesn't matter if it's 2x2, 4x4, 6x6, 8x8, radios that can turn on and off automatically, frequencies that automatically assign based on AI. All of this stuff happens that removes the need for someone to put in the intricate level of detail that we as RF engineers take for granted. Not trying to say robot overlords are going to take over the world, but I am saying there's this thing happening right now in this industry that's helping guide into that direction. And it's still the early days of it. But it reminds me of something I said on a podcast a couple of days ago. We're talking about AI, we're talking chat GBT, and we're talking about how you can take Kanye's voice that's a trained model, and I can write the dumbest rap in the world, and I can upload it, and I can get Kanye to sing it for me using AI. And how far along are we that now? I don't know if you saw the news even today, something happened where there's a Drake song that was put out that was published everywhere that was supposed to be this leak of a new Drake song, except it wasn't him, and
It's
except it
fake.
wasn't his
Yeah.
lyrics. So when you get to that point where people where it's indistinguishable, and then you realize the cold hard fact that, and I can't remember the person's name that I really need to give this quote credit to, that this is the worst that AI will ever be. Right now is the worst. This is the worst it's ever going to be. Tomorrow it's going to be better. And if you think about where we are, if people are having these concepts that these networks are going to be self-forming and self-mitigating and running and doing the things that they need to do, if they're talking about that today and they can do it in even a small scale today, what happens tomorrow? And so that's what I'm looking at, because then, in the future of where Wi-Fi is going, to me, it's like, okay, and this isn't any inside information, just to be totally clear. I don't even know if this syncs up with the direction of my employer. Like, I have no idea. I have kids yelling in the background now. This is great. So, but what I do know is that you're seeing the signs for this, and as the signs for this start to show themselves, that it's fascinating to think that there's a path forward in that journey. And in order to do that, you have got to have significant processing power. You've got to have hardware and equipment that can take care of that. They can take advantage of that connectivity, and they can be flexible in the way that it operates. You have to have these key components in order to make that happen. And now we're starting to see some of those come out, right? They've always been there
Yeah.
before. No one really messed with SDR too much. I mean, a bunch of us have these software defined radios everywhere, right? But now you're starting to see flexible radio assignments, flexible addressing. You're starting to see these things that can
Yeah.
change on
It'll
the
be
fly.
interesting when you look at just like how many Wi-Fi or Bluetooth radios a modern, enterprise grade access point has in it today. We're like, what are we up to? Six radios, eight
Yeah,
radios.
look at yeah, 8x8s,
Why not?
man. I mean, there's
Well, I'm talking about just the actual, just the different radios themselves. We're not talking spatial streams or antennas,
Yeah.
right? Why not
mhm.
put in radios for some of the other like protocols you were mentioning earlier? That's something that I hope to see, and I think we will see in the future. It feels like right
Yeah,
now,
yeah. It's
like
so
20
much
years
convergence.
ago. Yeah, yeah, totally. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it felt like Wi-Fi is new and it's really starting to gain traction, and it was just exciting. Kind of feels like we're in a similar moment now. We're
Yeah.
in Wi-Fi, but not just Wi-Fi, right? But in Wi-Fi, AI, connectivity in general. It seems like we're in a pretty,
That's
again, very exciting place.
I think so, but I also think that it's one of those where it's different. And it feels different. It feels different to me because, if you look at the evolution of the automobile, for example, you had a regular, you had your first, Model A or your Model T, and you had these, this vehicle, and you had to crank the wheel on it, and then then all of a sudden, what's called, auto turning, or what's it called where you turn the
Power
car.
steering.
Power
Yeah,
steering.
yeah, auto steering, auto turning, whatever. I'm thinking auto tuning. You had auto steering that came in, and it made everything easier, right? And then that's been the norm forever, right? And it's like, oh yeah, you just move the wheel a little bit. Now I don't even have to touch my steering wheel, right? I sit down in my car, I punch in an address, and I hit go, and it takes me there. And it's really fun if you turn the distance, the minimum distance between the car in front of you, you turn it all the way down as low as it can go, and then you set the speed really high. It's called Mad Max mode. I've learned on Teslas. It's a lot of fun. Uh, but now you're at this stage where I don't even have to steer, and I think that we're seeing some type of shift like that in our industry, which is creepy because and again, this is I mean, this is the statement that everybody hates, right? It's like you don't have to configure the network. And I heard it. I heard it a lot with one of my previous employers where it's like we're getting to the point where you don't have to configure it. If you have to configure it, you're doing it wrong. If you have to go out and do a site survey, you're doing it wrong. And it's like, what? You know, oh, how dare you? You blasphemy. Okay. There's always those people that stand on the, on the banks of the river yelling blasphemy as technology moves right in front of them.
Sure,
And it's
sure, sure.
fascinating to me because it really feels like we're at that stage where we're like, like the first time I drove a self-driving car, it's like, okay, I'm gonna let go. I'm gonna keep my foot right next to the brake just in case. Like, oh God, is this really gonna do what it's supposed to do? And I feel like we're really at that point right now with some of these networks. There's all the use cases on why it's bad. There's all the use cases on why it's good. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It's here. It's here. It's definitely here. But where it's gonna be in 12 months from now is going to be insane compared to where it is. Because just like AI, this is the worst that AI ops will ever be today.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well,
Crazy to
that's
think about.
yeah, it's super exciting, and it'll really be interesting to see how a lot of these different technologies converge and come into our world of Wi-Fi, or wireless connectivity. Hello, here at the end of episode 5 with Jack Rayner and Drew Lentz. Need to take this time to apologize at this point. The recording of the discussion that Jack and I had about open Wi-Fi, um, uh, there was a problem with the recording, and we didn't get Jack's end of that conversation. So this episode is just the interviews with both Jack and Drew, which were great. But again, unfortunately, the discussion portion is unavailable, which is a huge bummer. We'll have to have Jack back on in the future to discuss open Wi-Fi, which is a very interesting topic right now. And I think a lot of us in the industry are looking to understand and learn a bit more about open Wi-Fi. So we'll have to have Jack back on to have that discussion again. So again, apologies to Jack and Drew and all of you who are listening or watching to this episode of the podcast. But for this one, it's just the two interviews. Thanks all.